The Omega vanished after that fateful night. The Alpha King spent years desperately searching for her. Why would someone disappear after a single unforgettable night? And what could make a king spend years searching without giving up? If you love emotional stories filled with destiny and unforgettable journeys, subscribe and turn on notifications for more. What would you do if someone you cared about suddenly vanished without a trace? Now, let us return to a kingdom where one mysterious night changed everything and where every answer lies hidden beyond the silence that followed. Some mornings do not begin with sunrise. They begin with the silence left behind. The first light of dawn slowly spilled across the ancient towers of Mooncrest Citadel, painting the stone walls with soft shades of gold while the kingdom awakened to another peaceful morning. Palace servants quietly prepared breakfast, gardeners opened the gates to the western gardens, and the distant bronze bells welcomed a new day. Yet inside the royal residence, something felt unmistakably wrong. Alpha King Nathan Brooks stood outside a familiar wooden door, waiting for the gentle voice that always answered his morning greeting. None came. After a brief pause, he slowly pushed the door open. The chamber was perfectly neat. The curtains moved gently with the cool spring breeze drifting through the open window, and fresh, white roses still rested inside the crystal vase beside the balcony. Every personal belonging remained exactly where it had been the night before. Only one thing was missing. Emily Carter was gone. Nathan stepped farther into the quiet room, his eyes searching every familiar corner, as though she might suddenly appear with the warm smile that had quietly brightened the palace for so long. Instead, he found only silence. Upon the small wooden table beside the window rested a delicate silver pendant decorated with a pressed white flower beneath polished glass. It was the one keepsake Emily never allowed out of her sight. Nathan gently picked it up, his expression slowly changing from confusion to quiet disbelief. She would never have left something so precious behind unless she truly believed she could not return. The realization settled heavily inside his heart. Palace guards immediately searched every hallway, courtyard, stable, garden, and tower throughout Mooncrest Citadel. Servants hurried through every wing of the palace, asking one another if anyone had seen the young Omega after sunrise. The answer remained the same wherever Nathan looked. No one had. Captain Lucas Harper personally inspected the eastern gate, the western gardens, the royal library, and every path leading beyond the castle walls. Nothing appeared disturbed. No signs of struggle.
No hidden footprints. No abandoned belongings.
It was as though Emily had quietly disappeared with the morning mist itself. Nathan walked alone into the western gardens where the dew still rested upon blooming white roses. The stone fountain reflected the brightening sky while birds continued singing without knowing that the peaceful rhythm of the kingdom had just been quietly broken. Emily had always begun every morning there, watering flowers before greeting the elderly gardener with her familiar gentle smile. Today the watering can remained beside the fountain exactly where she had placed it the previous evening. The roses waited patiently beneath the rising sun, untouched for the very first time. The old gardener lowered his head with visible concern. She never missed a single morning, he whispered softly. Nathan said nothing. His gaze remained fixed upon the quiet garden, searching every pathway as though hope itself might suddenly appear between the flowers. In the distance, the bronze bells echoed once more across the valley while merchants opened their shops and children laughed beyond the palace walls, unaware that one mysterious absence had already changed the future of the entire kingdom. Standing alone beneath the morning light with a silver pendant resting quietly in his hand, Nathan understood only one thing with absolute certainty. Whatever had happened during the previous night had taken away the one person whose quiet presence had become far more important to him than he had ever allowed himself to admit. The days following Emily Carter's disappearance unfolded with a strange contradiction that neither Nathan Brooks nor anyone inside Mooncrest Citadel could ignore. The kingdom continued moving forward exactly as it always had. Merchants opened their market stalls before sunrise. Children hurried through village streets laughing on their way to morning lessons. Blacksmiths filled the air with the steady rhythm of hammer against iron, and the western gardens continued blooming beneath the gentle warmth of spring. Yet within the palace itself, every familiar place seemed to carry the quiet echo of someone no longer there. Nathan refused to accept that Emily had simply vanished without reason. Every evening after completing meetings with his royal council, he rode beyond the castle gates with only Captain Lucas Harper accompanying him. Together they visited nearby villages, riverside farms, mountain trails, and peaceful monasteries where travelers often paused for shelter. Nathan never announced himself as king during these journeys unless absolutely necessary. Instead, he quietly carried the small silver pendant Emily had left behind, showing it to innkeepers, shepherds, merchants, teachers, physicians, and elderly villagers, asking only one simple question. "Have you seen this woman?" The answer was always spoken with kindness, but never with certainty. Some believed they had seen someone resembling her along an old forest road. Others remembered a young woman helping repair a broken bridge before continuing toward the northern hills. None of the stories led to Emily herself. Weeks slowly turned into months. Despite every unsuccessful search, Nathan never ordered the palace to stop looking. Official duties still demanded his attention each day. Trade agreements required careful negotiation, harvest reports filled the council chamber, and neighboring kingdoms continued requesting diplomatic meetings. Nathan fulfilled every responsibility expected of an Alpha King, yet those closest to him quietly noticed the change. Whenever discussions ended earlier than expected, he no longer remained inside the throne room. Instead, he returned to the western gardens where Emily had once spent every morning. The watering can still rested, beside the old stone fountain exactly where the gardeners had chosen to leave it. No one moved it. Somehow it had become a silent reminder that hope had not completely disappeared. Nathan often stood there alone after sunset, watching the roses sway gently beneath the evening breeze while the silver pendant rested quietly inside his hand. Captain Lucas Harper observed those moments from a respectful distance, but never interrupted. He understood that some grief could not be eased by conversation. One afternoon, an elderly palace servant approached Nathan carrying a neatly folded linen cloth she had recently discovered inside Emily's former chamber. Wrapped inside were several dried white rose petals and a handwritten list reminding herself which servants preferred herbal tea during long winter evenings. Nathan carefully unfolded the paper, surprised that even her smallest personal notes centered entirely upon caring for others. There was nothing about herself, nothing about fear, nothing explaining why she had disappeared, only gentle reminders to make someone else's day a little brighter. Nathan quietly folded the note again and returned it to the servant with visible gratitude. As spring gradually gave way to early summer, the kingdom continued celebrating festivals, weddings, harvest markets, and ordinary moments of happiness. Nathan attended every public event because his people deserved a king fully devoted to their well-being. Yet after each celebration ended, he always found himself looking through the gathered crowd for one familiar face that never appeared. The laughter surrounding him only deepened the silence, waiting afterward. Standing once more beside the blooming roses beneath the fading evening light, Nathan slowly realized that searching for Emily had quietly become more than a royal responsibility. It had become the one promise his heart refused to abandon, no matter how many seasons might pass before the path leading back to her could finally be found. The first anniversary of Emily Carter's disappearance arrived quietly, marked not by royal ceremonies, but by the gentle return of spring blossoms throughout Mooncrest Kingdom. The western gardens once again filled with white roses, lavender, and climbing ivy, yet every flower seemed to remind Nathan Brooks of the woman whose kindness had once given those gardens their heart. Time continued moving with relentless patience. 1 year became 2. 2 became 3. The seasons painted the kingdom with endless cycles of blooming flowers, golden harvests, crimson autumn forests, and peaceful winter snow, but Nathan never allowed a single season to pass without continuing his search. The silver pendant Emily had left behind remained safely inside the inner pocket of his royal cloak wherever he traveled. It became the one object he never entrusted to anyone else. Every journey beyond the palace carried the same quiet purpose. Officially, Nathan inspected villages, strengthened trade routes, visited schools, hospitals, and farms, ensuring every corner of the kingdom prospered under his care. Privately, every destination held another opportunity to ask the same question that had never left his heart. He showed Emily's portrait to teachers welcoming children into classrooms, physicians preparing herbal medicines, shepherds guiding their flocks through open valleys, elderly couples resting outside village cottages, and travelers stopping beside roadside inns. Nearly everyone remembered meeting a young Omega whose kindness resembled the woman in the portrait. One elderly baker smiled warmly as she recalled a gentle stranger who had quietly repaired the roof of the village bakery after a violent rainstorm before disappearing again at sunrise. A fisherman remembered a woman who had spent several days teaching children how to read while waiting for supplies to arrive across the river. A physician spoke gratefully about an unknown traveler who had organized medicinal herbs for an overcrowded clinic before continuing north without asking for payment or recognition. None of them knew her name. None realized they had been describing the same woman. Nathan carefully recorded every memory inside a leather journal that gradually filled with stories of generosity instead of directions. As the years passed, he slowly realized something extraordinary. Although Emily herself remained impossible to find, traces of her compassion seemed to exist everywhere. Entire communities had quietly become stronger because someone had chosen to help without expecting anything in return. Captain Lucas Harper often watched Nathan reread those pages beside campfires during long evenings on the road. The journal no longer resembled an investigation. It had become a collection of lives gently changed by one remarkable person. Back inside Mooncrest Citadel, Nathan refused every suggestion that he should remove Emily's belongings from her former chamber. The room remained exactly as she had left it. Fresh flowers continued appearing beside the window every week, placed there by palace servants who still remembered her kindness years after her disappearance. Even the elderly gardener faithfully cared for the white roses outside her balcony, quietly believing she deserved to find them blooming if she ever returned. One peaceful evening, Nathan stood once again beside the old stone fountain where Emily had once greeted every sunrise. The fading light reflected across the still water, while birds settled into nearby trees. He gently opened the silver pendant and looked at the tiny pressed white flower preserved beneath its glass. For the first time in many years, he understood that he was no longer searching only because he hoped to find Emily. He continued searching because every story he heard reminded him of the person he wished he had truly known before she disappeared. Somewhere beyond the distant mountains, forests, and quiet villages, he believed she was still bringing light into someone else's life. Until the day he could thank her with his own words instead of silent regret, his journey would never truly end. By the 7th year, even the oldest citizens of Mooncrest Kingdom had quietly accepted that Emily Carter might never return. Life had continued to move forward, just as rivers continued flowing and seasons continued changing, yet Nathan Brooks never allowed the search to become a forgotten chapter of the past. Every spring he still traveled beyond the palace walls, following the smallest rumor with the same determination he had carried since the morning she disappeared. Many believed hope should have faded after so many years, but Nathan had learned that genuine hope did not become smaller with time. It simply became quieter. One rainy afternoon, Captain Lucas Harper received permission to organize a neglected storage chamber beneath the oldest wing of Mooncrest Citadel. The forgotten archive had remained untouched for decades, filled with weathered wooden shelves supporting countless journals, council records, maps, personal correspondence, and sealed boxes covered by layers of dust. While sorting through several damaged ledgers from previous royal administrations, Lucas noticed a narrow cedar chest hidden behind a collapsed shelf. Unlike the surrounding records, the chest carried no royal seal. Instead, a small white flower had been carefully carved into the lid. Curious, Lucas gently opened it. Inside rested several neatly folded letters tied together with faded blue ribbon, a leather-bound journal, and a collection of official travel permits issued nearly 8 years earlier. None of the documents had ever been presented to the royal council. Lucas carefully unfolded the first letter. It had never been delivered. The elegant handwriting immediately caught his attention because he had seen the same careful script countless times on Emily's notes left for palace servants, gardeners, and physicians. The words revealed no anger, no accusation, and no bitterness. Instead, they carried quiet gratitude for the kindness she had experienced inside the palace and sincere wishes for the kingdom's future. Yet one sentence stood apart from everything else. She wrote that sometimes leaving was the only way to protect people from a truth they were not yet prepared to understand. Lucas slowly lowered the page, feeling an unfamiliar weight settle inside his chest. He continued reading every document with increasing care. The journal contained observations about strange conversations overheard within the palace during the weeks before Emily vanished, references to sealed council meetings she had never intended to interrupt, and repeated reminders that she wanted no one blamed for the choice she believed she had to make. The official travel permits revealed something equally surprising. Someone had quietly authorized safe passage through several northern checkpoints during the exact week of her disappearance, yet the authorization had never appeared in the palace registry. Lucas immediately recognized that the missing records explained why every search had ended at the kingdom's northern border. The investigation had unknowingly followed incomplete information from the very beginning. As evening settled across Mooncrest Citadel, Lucas carefully gathered every letter, journal, and document before climbing the ancient stone staircase toward Nathan's private study. Outside, gentle rain washed across the castle windows while distant thunder rolled softly beyond the mountains. Nathan looked up from his desk as Lucas entered carrying the weathered cedar chest. Neither man spoke immediately. Lucas quietly placed the journal, letters, and travel permits across the polished oak table before saying only a single sentence. "Your Majesty, I believe we have been searching with only half of the truth." Nathan's eyes settled upon the familiar handwriting, and for the first time since Emily disappeared, he realized that the silence she had left behind had never been completely empty. Hidden beneath years of forgotten records, the first real path leading toward her had finally begun to reveal itself. Long after the palace had fallen silent, Nathan Brooks remained alone inside his private study with the weathered cedar chest resting upon the polished oak desk before him. A single lantern filled the room with warm amber light as gentle rain continued tapping against the tall windows overlooking the sleeping kingdom. Captain Lucas Harper quietly withdrew, leaving Nathan alone with the documents that had already begun changing everything he believed about the night Emily Carter disappeared. Nathan carefully unfolded the first letter, recognizing her graceful handwriting immediately. Every word reflected the same quiet kindness that had touched countless lives throughout Mooncrest Kingdom. She thanked palace servants for their friendship, praised the elderly gardener for teaching her patience through every changing season, and expressed sincere gratitude for the physicians whose dedication inspired her daily acts of service. There were no accusations,
No bitterness.
no complaints about loneliness or disappointment. Instead, every page carried concern for everyone except herself. Nathan slowly continued reading until one sentence caused him to pause completely. Emily had written that sometimes love meant walking away before hidden truths destroyed the people one wished to protect. The words echoed through the quiet chamber long after he lowered the page. He immediately opened the leather journal Lucas had discovered beside the letters. Unlike the personal notes Nathan had imagined finding, the journal carefully documented unusual conversations Emily had accidentally overheard inside the palace during the weeks before her disappearance. She described sealed council meetings held unusually late into the evening, unfamiliar visitors entering restricted corridors, and repeated warnings exchanged in whispers whenever members of the royal household approached. Yet she never claimed certainty. Instead, she repeatedly questioned whether misunderstanding those moments might place innocent people in danger. The final entries became increasingly emotional. Emily wrote that she feared remaining inside the palace might force others to choose between loyalty and truth before the full picture became clear. She believed leaving quietly would protect everyone until the hidden pieces finally revealed themselves. Nathan closed the journal for several moments, overwhelmed not by what she had written, but by what she had never done. She had never blamed him. She had never questioned his character. Even while preparing to disappear, she still trusted the man he wished he had been years earlier. The realization settled deeply inside him. Every lonely journey, every unanswered question, every spring spent searching had been built upon the mistaken belief that she had abandoned the kingdom. In reality, she had been carrying a burden entirely alone while trying to shield everyone around her from consequences she feared she could not prevent. Nathan reached for the official travel permits next. The dates matched perfectly with the final evening Emily had been seen inside Mooncrest Citadel. Someone had quietly approved safe passage toward the northern mountain provinces using authority available only to a handful of senior officials. The missing records explained why every royal search had unknowingly followed the wrong roads year after year. Nathan carefully spread a large map across his desk and compared every location mentioned inside the journal with the authorized travel route. A clear pattern slowly appeared. Small villages, remote monasteries, mountain valleys, and isolated farming communities formed a single winding path leading far beyond the places his search parties had ever investigated. Dawn slowly approached as the rain finally stopped outside the palace windows. Nathan gently closed the cedar chest before slipping Emily's silver pendant into his hand once more. For years he had searched because he refused to surrender hope. Now, for the first time since the morning she vanished, he finally possessed something even more valuable than hope. He possessed a direction. Standing before the first light of a new sunrise, Nathan quietly understood that the next journey would not simply be another search. It would become the first time he truly followed the path Emily herself had chosen all those years before. 3 mornings later, Nathan Brooks quietly departed Mooncrest Citadel before sunrise with only Captain Lucas Harper riding beside him. There were no royal banners, no ceremonial guards, and no grand procession announcing the king's departure. Nathan wanted this journey to be different from every search that had come before. Instead of sending others ahead, he intended to walk the same roads Emily Carter had chosen years earlier, hoping to understand not only where she had gone, but also why each step had mattered to her. Guided by the journal, the forgotten travel permits, and the carefully marked map spread across countless evenings inside his study, the two men traveled north through peaceful valleys, quiet forests, and winding mountain roads rarely visited by the royal court. Their first destination was a small farming village mentioned in one of Emily's journal entries. The elderly schoolteacher welcomed them warmly and immediately recognized Emily's portrait before Nathan could even ask his familiar question. Her eyes brightened with gentle remembrance as she described a young woman who had spent an entire autumn teaching children to read after the village instructor had fallen ill. She never accepted payment. Instead, she simply asked the families to continue helping one another after she left. Nathan listened quietly while children, now several years older, proudly showed him the books they had learned to read because of the patient Omega who had once believed every child deserved hope. The journey continued toward a monastery hidden among rolling hills where an elderly healer remembered Emily organizing medicinal herbs late into every evening while caring for travelers suffering from winter illness. Farther north, a carpenter recalled how she had quietly repaired broken furniture inside the community hall before anyone realized she had begun working. A widow living beside a narrow river smiled through grateful tears while describing the young woman who had visited her every morning during an especially lonely season, bringing warm bread and fresh flowers without ever asking for recognition. Nathan slowly realized that Emily had never truly disappeared. She had simply continued becoming the same compassionate person she had always been, only far beyond the borders of the kingdom that still searched for her. Every village carried another story. Every story revealed another life gently changed through ordinary acts of kindness. The leather journal Nathan had once filled with uncertain rumors gradually became something entirely different. Each page now held names, places, dates, and heartfelt memories connecting together like pieces of a single path leading steadily farther into the northern mountains. Captain Lucas Harper quietly noticed the change within Nathan as well. The Alpha King no longer hurried from village to village searching only for answers. He paused to help repair fences, distribute supplies, listen to local concerns, and thank every person. willing to share memories of Emily. Without realizing it, Nathan had begun following her example rather than merely following her footsteps. Late one afternoon, the travelers reached a peaceful mountain village nestled beside a crystal-clear lake surrounded by towering pine forests. As Nathan entered the village square, an elderly baker studying Emily's portrait smiled with unmistakable recognition. She gently placed her flower-covered hands upon the edge of the wooden counter before looking toward the narrow road disappearing beyond the hills. "If you continue another 12 miles north," she said softly, "you may finally find the woman who taught our grandchildren that kindness can become a home wherever someone chooses to stay." Nathan stood completely still, holding the silver pendant inside his hand as a gentle mountain breeze carried the scent of wildflowers across the quiet village. After nearly 8 years of searching, the journey that had begun with silence and uncertainty suddenly felt closer to its destination than ever before. The narrow mountain road curved gently through towering pine forests before finally opening into a peaceful valley unlike any Nathan Brooks had ever seen. Small cottages built from weathered stone rested beside clear streams that reflected the bright afternoon sky, while children laughed freely among wildflower fields stretching toward distant hills. It was a place untouched by royal ceremony, where every face carried quiet contentment instead of hurried ambition. Nathan dismounted slowly, his heart beating with unfamiliar uncertainty after nearly 8 years of searching. He no longer feared that he would never find Emily Carter. Instead, he wondered whether she would even wish to see him after everything that had happened. An elderly woman standing outside a small bakery noticed the silver pendant resting in Nathan's hand and smiled softly before pointing toward a modest cottage surrounded by blooming white roses and lavender. "She is tending the garden," the woman whispered with gentle certainty. Nathan thanked her quietly before walking alone along the narrow stone path. Every step felt heavier than the last. Beyond the flowering shrubs, he finally saw a familiar figure kneeling beside rows of medicinal herbs beneath the warm afternoon sun. Her long chestnut hair moved gently with the mountain breeze as she carefully tied young rose branches to wooden supports exactly as she had once done inside the western gardens of Mooncrest Citadel. She looked older now, shaped by passing years rather than changed by them. The same calm grace remained in every movement. Without realizing it, Nathan stopped walking. For several silent moments, he simply watched the woman he had searched for across countless seasons. As though sensing another presence nearby, Emily slowly stood and turned toward the garden gate. Their eyes met for the first time in nearly 8 years. Neither of them spoke. The quiet between them held too many unanswered questions for hurried words to carry. Emily's blue eyes widened slightly with surprise before gradually softening into thoughtful stillness. Nathan saw no anger within her expression. He also saw no immediate joy. Instead, there was quiet recognition, gentle caution, and the peaceful composure of someone who had learned to live beside old memories without allowing them to define every new day. Nathan lowered his gaze for a brief moment before taking one careful step forward. "I finally found you," he said softly, his voice carrying neither royal authority nor expectation, only simple honesty. Emily looked toward the distant mountains before returning her eyes to him. "I always believed one day you might," she answered gently. Her calm reply carried no accusation, making Nathan's heart ache even more deeply than anger ever could have. A gentle breeze carried the scent of lavender between them while birds sang from nearby pine branches, filling the silence with quiet life instead of discomfort. Nathan slowly removed the silver pendant from his pocket and held it carefully in both hands. "You left this behind," he whispered. Emily smiled faintly as sunlight reflected across the tiny pressed white flower preserved beneath the glass. "I hoped it would remind you that some things are worth protecting, even when they cannot stay beside you." Nathan looked at the pendant before raising his eyes again. "I spent years believing you had left because you no longer wished to remain." Emily gently shook her head. "Sometimes leaving is the only way to keep hope alive until the truth has time to find its own voice." Neither of them tried to explain the missing years all at once. Neither reached for dramatic promises or hurried forgiveness. Instead, They simply stood together inside the quiet mountain garden where white roses bloomed beneath the afternoon sun, allowing the silence that had separated them for so long to become, at last, the beginning of a conversation neither heart had ever truly stopped waiting to have. The following morning arrived wrapped in gentle mountain mist as sunlight slowly spilled across the peaceful valley where Emily Carter had quietly built a new life. Nathan Brooks made no attempt to persuade her to return to Mooncrest Citadel. He understood now that trust could never be recovered through titles, promises, or authority. It could only be rebuilt through patience. Instead of speaking about the past, he asked a simple question before sunrise. "May I help in the garden?" Emily looked at him for a brief moment before handing him a wooden watering can without another word. Together they worked beneath the cool morning air, watering rows of herbs, tying climbing roses to weathered wooden frames, and gathering fresh vegetables for elderly neighbors who could no longer tend their own fields. Nathan quickly discovered that every person in the valley knew Emily not as a mysterious traveler, but as the woman who quietly solved problems before anyone needed to ask for help. She organized reading lessons for children each afternoon, prepared herbal remedies beside the village healer every Wednesday, repaired worn blankets before winter arrived, and visited elderly residents who lived alone among the surrounding hills. She had never spoken about the palace. She had never introduced herself by title. She simply chose kindness every ordinary day. Nathan followed her from one task to another without attempting to lead. He carried baskets of vegetables to nearby cottages, repaired loose fence posts with local craftsmen, chopped firewood beside village families, and helped the schoolteacher arrange books for the coming season. The villagers gradually realized that the quiet stranger working beside Emily was the Alpha King himself, yet Nathan politely discouraged every formal greeting. "Today I am only someone learning from a remarkable teacher," he answered whenever people addressed him by his royal title. Emily heard those words more than once, yet she offered no immediate reply. She simply continued living as she always had, allowing his actions to speak far louder than explanations ever could. Days slowly became weeks. Captain Lucas Harper remained in the village as well, quietly assisting local families while sending brief reports back to Mooncrest Citadel assuring the royal council that the kingdom remained peaceful under temporary stewardship. Nathan no longer measured progress by how quickly Emily smiled or how often they spoke about the years apart. Instead, he began noticing smaller changes that carried greater meaning. One evening, she invited him to join several village children planting young white rose bushes beside the community school. Another morning, she handed him fresh bread before beginning their daily work without waiting for him to ask. During quiet walks beside the crystal-clear lake, conversations slowly returned between them, not through painful memories, but through discussions about books, gardens, changing seasons, and the dreams children shared about their future. The distance that had once separated them no longer felt impossible to cross. It simply required countless ordinary moments built with honesty. As summer slowly approached, news quietly reached the mountain valley that the hidden deception surrounding Emily's disappearance had finally been uncovered through the forgotten records preserved inside Mooncrest Citadel. The remaining members of the royal council publicly acknowledged that Emily had never abandoned the kingdom, and official proclamations corrected years of misunderstanding throughout every province. Nathan never celebrated the announcement. Standing beside Emily beneath blooming white roses one peaceful evening, he understood that public recognition mattered far less than the quiet trust they were patiently rebuilding together. Looking across the valley where laughter drifted from nearby cottages beneath the warm colors of sunset, Nathan realized that the greatest journey of his life had never been finding the woman he had lost. It was becoming the man she could finally choose to believe in again. Autumn returned to Mooncrest Kingdom beneath a sky filled with soft golden light as Nathan Brooks and Emily Carter slowly made their journey home together. There were no royal celebrations waiting along the roads and no grand procession announcing their arrival. That choice belonged to both of them. Nathan had learned that the quietest moments often carried the deepest meaning, and Emily had spent many years building a peaceful life without seeking recognition. When the towers of Mooncrest Citadel finally appeared beyond the rolling hills, neither of them hurried forward. They paused beside a field of wildflowers where the gentle breeze carried the familiar scent of white roses drifting from the western gardens beyond the palace walls. Emily smiled softly, recognizing the fragrance she had never forgotten. As they entered the palace grounds, the elderly gardener was the first to notice them. His weathered hands trembled as he removed his hat before tears quietly filled his eyes. Without speaking, he simply welcomed Emily back by opening the small wooden gate leading toward the garden she had once cared for every morning. One by one, palace servants, physicians, librarians, teachers, cooks, and gardeners gathered along the pathways. None of them applauded. None rushed forward. They simply smiled with genuine warmth, grateful that the woman whose kindness had touched every corner of the palace had finally returned. Nathan remained slightly behind Emily, allowing her to receive every heartfelt greeting without standing in front of her as king. Later that afternoon, the royal council assembled inside the great hall. Nathan calmly addressed every noble, advisor, and provincial representative with complete honesty. He explained that Emily had never abandoned the kingdom, never betrayed the palace, and never acted from selfishness. The forgotten records had revealed the truth, and the misunderstanding that had lasted for years belonged to the kingdom, not to the woman who had quietly protected others without asking for recognition. The council formally restored her honor before the entire court. Emily accepted their words with graceful humility, yet what mattered most to her had already happened long before that gathering. Trust had returned through everyday actions rather than public declarations. During the weeks that followed, life inside Mooncrest Citadel gradually found a new rhythm. Nathan no longer began each morning inside the council chamber. Instead, he met Emily in the western gardens where they watered flowers together before beginning the responsibilities of the day. They visited villages side by side, listened to farmers, encouraged young students, thanked physicians, and spent quiet afternoons planting new white rose bushes throughout the kingdom. The silver pendant Emily had once left behind now rested safely around her neck once again, while Nathan carried no symbol except the lessons the long years had written upon his heart. One peaceful evening they stood beside the old stone fountain where the search had truly begun so many years earlier. White roses bloomed around them beneath the fading light as birds settled gently among the ancient trees. Nathan looked toward Emily with quiet gratitude before saying, "I spent years searching for you across the kingdom. I never realized the greatest journey was learning how to become someone worthy of walking beside you again." Emily smiled with the same gentle warmth that had never disappeared despite the passing years. "Sometimes people become lost," she answered softly, "not because they cannot find the road, but because they first need to discover who they are while walking it." Together they watched the final rays of sunlight disappear beyond the distant mountains as the bronze bells echoed peacefully across Mooncrest Kingdom. Their story was never truly about one person vanishing or another refusing to stop searching. It became the story of two hearts transformed by patience, truth, forgiveness, and hope, proving that love is not measured by how quickly someone is found, but by the quiet courage to keep choosing one another after every season has changed.